Namaste, and welcome to this practice for shoulder stand. So this is really a tutorial. I am going to assume that you're all warmed up with some sun salutations and you've done some neck and shoulder opening, particularly perhaps front of the body opening, hamstrings open, that sort of thing. Because we're just focusing in this particular video on how to do the shoulder stand, not necessarily how to do it and perfect it, but how to make it accessible. So the part of the body that is on the ground for shoulder stand are the tops of the shoulders and the back of the head. And in some variations, like we're doing a supported shoulder stand today, the backs of the arms and elbows. And what we really need to do is establish before we start our neck flexion. So here you can see when you're sitting upright or standing upright and you bow the head forward, most people can't take their necks to be parallel with the floor to make a perpendicular right angle with the top of their spine. And that means that if you put your body into that position on the floor and put all of your weight above your shoulders and expect your neck to be flat or at a right angle to the rest of your body, you will strain something, or over time you will damage the body in some way. So we want to avoid that at all costs and use a little support instead. So with shoulder stand, a little bit of support is much better to making the posture accessible than doing it badly, doing it to the point of injury. So today I'm using these half blocks. I've got a section of a set of 4 half blocks here. You can use full blocks if you need to give yourself a little bit more lift, or a folded blanket or several folded blankets to give yourself some lift from the floor. And we're just trying to create enough space so that the neck doesn't need to be in that 45-degree flexion when we come up into our shoulder stand. So firm blankets are best. Folded beach towels are fantastically good for this because they've got a little bit more firmness to them, and you want enough lift. Okay, so let us come into shoulder stand. So if you don't want to do a floor-based shoulder stand and you want to do a practice with a wall, then the second part of the video is for you. But if you're keen to be working on the floor, then we need to get ourselves onto our blocks in a way that is useful. So you'll notice my hair is down today because it's just easier to get it out of the way. What we want to do is lie down across the support, whatever it is, so that we've got a little bit of space between the tops of our shoulders and the edge of that support. And it might take you a few goes to get used to where that should be. But for me, I find it's about this much. So I guess 1.5 inches or so. Let's call it 3 centimeters and be done. Okay. So here, it's also useful to tuck your clothing in if it's not tight. Mine is tight enough, hopefully, to stay in place. Fingers crossed. And we're going to rest our arms down by our sides, just making sure that there's nothing touching the back of the neck and that the head is free to move. But when you come up into shoulder stand, don't look to the side. So keep looking upwards, keep the head centered. And that can be difficult when you're working with a video. So I suggest that you watch the video first and then practice. So arms can hold on here at the sides. And then we're just simply rocking our feet backwards over the head and upwards. Some people prefer to come in via plough pose, so I'll show you that first. So you lift the hips up and just let the feet come down to the floor behind you. This gives you time to organize your shoulders, so you can come up onto your shoulders. You can tell if your support is touching the back of your neck or not. And then from there, you can come up into shoulder stand. And this entry is quite good for anyone who's comfortable in plough and can easily get their feet to the floor in plough. Not so good if you don't normally practice plough or you can't get your feet to the floor in plough. So let's try that for an entry for people who need perhaps a little bit more space. Sorry, I've just kicked something into my eye, I think. There we are. So arms down by the side. I like to hold on to my mat. You can also do this just by pressing your elbows down into the floor like we do for bridge pose. We're just using a bit of traction. We're lifting the feet up and back, and then hands onto the body above the buttocks as soon as the hips are off the floor, not turning the head, just like I did. Don't turn your head. All good. So this bendy banana pose is vipariti karani, sometimes called legs up the wall. And this is actually what it looks like in practice when it's practiced freestanding. And then from here, we can work our way into a shoulder stand. So how we do that is we bring the feet towards the hips and we walk the hands up the back towards the collarbones. And then simply just focus on keeping the elbows quite close to each other. You can keep walking the hands up the back, keep drawing the shoulder blades towards each other. And we're aiming, although we gently aim, to be a nice upright position without our necks touching the back of our support. So if your neck is touching the back of your support, you perhaps need to just give yourself a little bit more room, bring your shoulders closer to the top of your support. And you can hold and breathe. When you're up here, just relaxing the toes. And then when you're ready to come down, you come back to vipariti karani, just letting your bottom sag behind you a little. Then you take your arms to the floor, brace yourself as you come down. You can bend your knees if you want to. Try to keep your head on the floor all of the time. And when you release, arms out to the side, maybe a gentle turn of the nose from side to side, and take stock. I'm going to come up into sitting now, but take stock of how that feels as you release. And the reason I say that is because you'll soon find that if you listen to your body, that when you come out of a posture, it tells you if you've done too much, or if you've expected too much, or if you've held it for too long, or if you've pushed too far. And then you can adjust your practice next time, remembering that every time we come to the mat is different. So what about some variations of shoulder stand? If you're happy in shoulder stand, you're happy to hold, what can we do when we're up there that feels good? So there are myriad different variations of shoulder stand. So once you've been up and you've established how far away your support needs to be, you can come up for a second go. Resting in between is good. So when you're ready, hips up, hands onto the back, moving the elbows towards each other, lifting the hips towards the nose a little bit, and lifting the feet above the hips. Just make sure you're comfortable, feel supported, and then you can hold here for anything up to 15 breaths. Deep breaths. And then, or you don't have to hold for 15 breaths, of course, and then we're moving into our variations. So the first variation is to lengthen one foot down to the floor as you lengthen the opposite heel upwards. And it doesn't matter if your foot doesn't come all the way down. You can put a chair or something behind you if you want to reach something, but the floor is not accessible. And then coming back up, and then the other one. So a single leg plough, or sometimes these are called single leg lifts in shoulder stand. And in the Shivananda series, if you practice the basic Shivananda series, leg lifts are done on the floor, but once you're adept in shoulder stand, leg lifts are done in shoulder stand. Fantastic stuff. And then once you've done one at a time, you can bring both feet down and you can come into plough pose here. So if you can easily touch the floor and plough, then you can interlace the fingers behind the body and press down with the upper arms and the hands towards the mat, or simply hold the sides of the mat. I quite like that variation. If your feet don't touch the floor, try widening the feet out to the sides. And that can sometimes help give you a little bit more room. I'm just going to prop myself up onto my shoulders a bit more. And that's what we're doing. We're sort of adjusting, we're making movements that help. Or you can bend your knees and they can rest onto the forehead, just briefly or lightly, or by the ears. And that helps us to also feel this position of nice rounding through the back, length through the back of the body, but without the legs having to be straight. You don't have to release the hands from the back, but if you do, holding onto the mat, pressing the upper arms downwards to give you some support and some space in the back of the neck as well, or interlacing the fingers and pressing the upper arms downwards this way. And so in plough pose, we can rest, take a few deep breaths. It's quite nice to be here for, again, 5 to 15 breaths if you can, before coming back up into shoulder stand. And then from shoulder stand, we can go to bridge pose, but actually we're going to go from plough to bridge pose. So hands on the back, reaching one leg over towards the floor, counterbalancing with the opposite leg. So it's really controlled as you touch down. There's no thumping down to the floor. And then you're in bridge pose, thumbs on the outside, fingertips towards each other under the body. Otherwise you will dislocate your thumbs. And then we come back the opposite way. Again, counterposing, perhaps a little bit of momentum and then counterposing. Then we do the opposite leg leaving, and it's really controlled. So it's really controlled, it's really soft in the landing, holding in your bridge pose for a couple of breaths perhaps, before coming back the way. You can prepare yourself, maybe a touch of momentum as you kick off. And then really high up on the shoulders, really drawing the shoulder blades towards each other underneath the body. You can do this with both legs. So both legs up, both legs into shoulder stand, both legs, she says. My head came off the floor a little there, but it shouldn't, doesn't need to. And then touching down nice and lightly. And then here you're in a lovely bridge pose. Your neck is a little bit more free, but please don't turn it from side to side. You can be up on your tiptoes if it gives your wrists a bit more space. Taking some nice deep breaths. And then we're going to actually come down because the next part of the sequence I don't want to be on supports for. So coming down as before we move into a half wheel and then a full wheel. So taking a moment when you come down to just gently roll the head from side to side. If you're not going from plough into bridge, you can simply come out of your shoulder stand in the same way as you normally do. So I'm going to remove my supports, which have been very useful. And I actually prefer a slightly higher support. I think I used these ones today because they were handy, but I prefer a slightly higher support. So a full block is a little bit better for my neck, I think. And if you find that on the supports they move apart, you'll notice that I came down and readjusted mine halfway through. That wrapping a sticky mat over them helps to keep them together and helps to give your elbows a little bit of grip. So once we've done a bridge pose, we can try for a half wheel. So a half wheel is a bridge pose where we hold our ankles. And so you can hold your ankles and press up into this if you would like to, if you easily hold your ankles. But I find that my arms are just a little short for that. I can do it if I have to, but it's not the most comfortable thing, and yoga should always be something that we feel good doing. So I prefer to come up into my bridge pose, roll my shoulders underneath, and then reach for my heels or reach for my ankles. And so here, We want to be careful that our knees are not falling too close together or too far apart, and that the lift that we're feeling is happening in the backs of the arms, the shoulders, and in the heels of the feet, with just the gentlest of pressure down in the back of the head, because the back of the head does need a little bit of effort there to engage the muscles of the back of the neck. And if then this feels comfortable, you can release the hands from the heels, take the hands either the side of the head, try to avoid your hair, and then press up into a full wheel. And here we're aiming to get not the arms absolutely straight, but a little softness in the elbows, the legs quite long, the belly lifted, and the neck completely free, so no holding here in the back of the neck. Holding for as long as feels comfortable, before very gently coming all the way down. And whilst the impetus or the instinct is to draw the knees into the chest, try lengthening the feet a little bit away from the buttocks and swaying the knees not so far, just a little from side to side first. So it's a different movement for the spine rather than backward bending and forward bending. And then if you want to, you can bring your knees into your chest, give the low back a little bit of a massage by rolling them around. All good. And so the final posture in our shoulder stand series is the fish pose. And we do them all together because they are pose, counter pose, pose, counter pose through the series. And energetically, they're all connected, and they work together as a combined group really, really well. So for fish pose, we are lying on the backs, rolling one hand underneath the body, palm turned down, and then the other hand underneath the body, palm turned down as well. I often interlace my thumbs to draw my elbows and upper arms towards each other, but then release the thumbs away from each other. I'm going to lengthen my legs. You can do this with your feet on the floor if you want to, but lengthening the legs is more traditional. And then to come up, we're pressing into the elbows and the forearms and the palms, sitting up and looking forward. And you need to be quite high, and then taking the head back. It's difficult to do and talk at the same time. So I'm going to take the crown of my head back behind me. I don't want a great deal of weight into my head. And in fact, I'm hovering my head right now. But if I sat a little bit further back or stretched my neck, I can get my head to touch the floor. But touching the floor is just a light graze, very little weight into the head, pressing down with the elbows, lifting that space between the shoulder blades so you open the heart, and keeping the mouth shut if you're not talking to teach. Legs are nice and relaxed here. When you're ready to come out, simply looking up, pressing down with the elbows, drawing the chin more towards the chest so you can relax the back of the head down to the floor and then release the arms from underneath the body. And that is one of the most delicious feelings in yoga. And often fish pose is used immediately before relaxation because it's a really great way to transition into relaxation. But we need to maybe just move the head and the neck around a little. So a gentle sway of the nose from side to side. And if you need a little bit more of a release, you can interlace the fingers behind the back of the head. Use the arms to lift the head up off the floor, not the neck, and then gently turning the head from side to side, using the arms and not the neck. And when you're ready, you can release down. And again, perhaps that feels better now, gently swaying the nose from side to side. So we end up with a really beautiful release through the neck. The neck and the shoulders have made a great deal of effort, but now they're able to soften and relax. So if you're ready to transition into relaxation from this practice, you can. And if you're ready to do a variation of the shoulder stand, then that's what I'm going to demonstrate next. So the fish, as a counterpose to shoulder stand, is held for half the amount of time that you would do the shoulder stand, the plough, the bridge. So the fish and the wheel make up half the time of the other postures. And you don't have to do them all, of course, but if you're doing shoulder stand and plough, do a fish. You don't need to do the bridge and the wheel as well if you don't want to. Okay, so options for shoulder stand. I'm going to take one of my blocks, and this is more of a brick block, and I'm going to come to the wall here to demonstrate one of the options for a supported shoulder stand that's not freestanding, perhaps a little less intense for the neck. So shoulder stand is a beautiful posture, but if you've got neck and shoulder injuries that you're carrying with you, it isn't perhaps the best posture for you at this time. So what can you do instead? So setting yourself up really close to the wall, almost so you've had to turn your shoulder closest to the wall away from you and towards this front side of your mat. You're going to roll your torso down and your legs up so that you end up with your bottom quite close to the wall. It doesn't need to be touching them. So if you've got really tight hamstrings or you're really tight in the back of the body, you can soften the knees here, but the legs are still supported by the wall, and it feels a little bit kinder to the body than perhaps a shoulder stand proper. And also, this variation of legs up the wall, or Vipariti Karani, is a very nice pose to do for inducing relaxation at the end of the day, for calming the mind. If you don't mind having your legs long, let them be long. That's all good. So this is the first option for people who are new to shoulder stand and wanting to explore the benefits of inverted practice, but without, particularly at the moment, if you're not able to practice with a yoga teacher in person, if you're unsure of where you're going, then this is a great alternative to a full shoulder stand. And then from here, we can practice a little bit more of a shoulder stand type of pose by using our blocks. So here, we place the feet onto the wall and roll the hips up and place that block underneath the sacrum, roll the hips down. So that firm part of the spine, that solid part of the spine behind the hips is supported, not too high up into the fleshy part of the back, not too low into the buttocks. And again, you can relax the legs up the wall, arms can relax out to the side. If you feel super comfortable, arms relax over the head. And this is a really lovely passive shoulder stand variation with just that little bit of lift in the pelvis. It helps to release in the body. And if it feels comfortable on that low setting of the block, you can try pressing the feet into the wall, rolling up, orientating your block onto its medium setting, settling your sacrum down again there, making sure you're balanced on the sacrum, not higher or lower, and again relaxing the legs up the wall. So the wall takes the weight of the legs and the block takes the weight of the pelvis, and the back of the body, you still get that feeling of contact across the tops of the shoulders, that space between the shoulder blades, the very base of the neck, the last vertebra in the cervical spine, and the back of the head. And we're getting the benefits of being inverted because we're getting that resting of the venous return in our circulatory system and an increased blood flow to the essential organs in the torso, to the heart, to the brain, to the skin of the face. Inversions are supposed to make you glow and your skin to look amazing. And at the same time, it is really restful to be here without having to hold anything, without having to make big efforts. So we can enjoy a deep, relaxed breath, softness in the face. And there's no stress for the shoulders, there's no stress for the neck here. If you wanted to look from side to side, you can. It's not going to do you any damage. I wouldn't do a lot of it, but a little is fine. And so if you feel super comfortable here, you can try your block on its highest setting. It's a little bit harder to balance there, but that's okay. You can turn your block all the way up, just trying to get it underneath the sacrum rather than anywhere else, and release the legs up the wall. I find that the block on its highest setting is just feels a little unstable for me, and I prefer doing a different variation personally. But if this is just what you want, then perhaps it's just what you want. So for now, I'm going to take the block away and just come down. But if you are loving that particular variation, come down one stage at a time to rest the hips to the floor, and you'll get the most amazing release as you do. So what else can we do here at the wall? What other variations are there? So you can use the wall to help you get into a shoulder stand. So sometimes the challenge is actually getting from lying flat on the back into the shoulder stand. Use the wall for a little bit of support. So again, here you could have support underneath the back of the upper back if you wanted. I like my arms down by my sides, holding onto my mat, and then pressing the feet into the wall to roll the hips up, and then hold onto the back underneath, above the buttocks, and stretch the legs up the wall. And this is a really nice variation. You get some of the sense of effort in the upper body, increased length at the back of the neck, although we don't want to press it absolutely flat. And you also get some support from the wall. You get an increased sensation of inversion as well. Your legs are your feet are a lot higher than your heart. And if you want to from here, you can take the toes to the floor and begin rolling the shoulder blades towards each other, maybe holding a little higher up the back, and then reaching the legs up, maybe one at a time or both at the same time, into a more shoulder stand looking posture. So you can do any one of these. You can even keep the feet on the wall and just do this with the knees bent. And from here, of course, you can work into plough pose as well if you wanted to, and you can use support with the wall behind you if you'd like to, if that feels comfortable, or you can take both legs back. I'm not going to do that because I'm not on support at the moment, and I prefer not to bend my neck for so long in that general direction. Releasing down when you're ready, and returning either to legs up the wall for a gentle sway of the nose from side to side, or you can bend your knees into your chest and hug them towards you. Make any movements that feel good with your back, with your knees. And then from here, I'm just going to press myself away from the wall. I'm lucky because I've got a cork mat, so I can do that. Don't try that with a sticky mat. They don't respond quite so well. So from here, you can come into your bridge pose and perhaps use the elbows to lift as well as the feet. And we do this kind of bridge in class quite often. It's quite a nice one. You could even have the feet wider and circle the hips a little bit, which we often do when we're focused on hip practice, because it's a really nice way to massage the thigh bones into the hip sockets. And so because your shoulder stand practice has been supported and less traditional, unconventional, if you will, you can do an unconventional bridge, no problem at all. It will suit your practice. And then, of course, you can come into a fish pose as well. And today I'm going to show you a supported fish pose and some variations on that too. So for that, I just need another block and a bolster. But if you don't have a bolster, you can use a rolled up blanket. And if you don't have blocks, you can use books, but I would wrap them in something like a towel or a blanket. So the first fish variation I'm going to show you is one with a bolster. So this applies to a rolled up blanket as well. But if you have a bolster, there's usually a handle end. Just thump it on its opposite end a few times to get as much of the filling down to the opposite end as possible. So you end up with a slight incline. And if your bolster doesn't have a slight incline, you can put a block or a cushion or something underneath the end of it to lift the head end of your body. Then we sit against the bolster. So it's right up against the low back and recline over it. This is one of my favorite ways to do fish pose. It's so relaxing. Feet on the floor, knees can be bent, arms out to the side. Feeling that gentle opening across the chest. So that's what we're trying to do. When we're in shoulder stand, we do have an openness across the chest, but we've also got a closedness across the throat because of the position of the neck. So here we've got the openness across the chest and the throat as well. And the arms can release, the shoulders can relax, the back of the neck is nice and supported, the back of the head as well. And if it feels comfortable with the knees bent and the feet on the floor, you can try extending your legs so that your legs are long, like they would be in relaxation pose. And some people will like that. But if it feels too bendy in the low back there, just bring your knees back in, place your feet on the floor, no problem. If it feels super comfortable with the legs extended, you can bring the soles of the feet together and let the knees relax out to the side in bound angle pose, Baddha Konasana. And this posture is one of the most common restorative yoga postures. But if, like me, your knees are off the ground, you can use a couple of blocks or a couple of cushions underneath the knees, underneath the thighs to support the legs. And then it becomes extremely restful and restorative. There's no need for holding in the hips. There's no pulling on the knees or the ankles. And you can stay here for as long as you like. 5 minutes, 10 minutes maybe. Brilliant. And particularly if you have a curvature of your upper back, sometimes comes as we age. This is a really lovely way to release, to feel the openness across the chest in a supportive way. So that is fish pose number 1. To come out of it, or fish pose alternative number 1, to come out of it, bending the knees and just rolling to one side enough to remove your support and push the support out of the way so that you can come back to lying on your back and allow your spine to soften back into this more neutral shape before you move or do anything else. So a little rebound. And that in yin yoga, that's what it's called, the point of rebound. It helps to balance our practice. Very good. So to fish is done with 2 blocks I now have handy. Blocks like T shape. So one block on its longest side, which will go underneath the space between my shoulder blades, and one block on its shortest side, which will go underneath my head. So medium height, highest height. And then I'm just finding the right place to lie down. So I find sometimes holding the block that goes behind my shoulder blades is quite useful. And then I can put them into place as I recline over them. And for some people, like I don't mind a back bend. I quite enjoy that. I'm less happy in a side bend and a twist. But I enjoy a back bend, and so the block that's between my shoulder blades, I can have quite low. I can have it almost to the point of the bottom of my thoracic spine, the bottom of my rib cage, and it feels quite comfortable. And it's very opening at then across the underneath of the rib cage and the front of the body, which is quite nice. But not everybody is comfortable there, and actually having your block sliding it a little bit higher up, so it's higher up between the shoulder blades, maybe even just coming towards the base of the neck, although the neck won't be on it, can be more useful. And that makes it less of a back bend in the low back, but more of an opening across the top of the chest. And so finding your spot, if it feels dreadfully uncomfortable, then often just inching it a little higher or a little lower, centimetering it or millimetering it, will make all the difference. And for those of us so my rhomboids, they're the muscles just inside the shoulder blades, between the shoulder blades and the spine, are the muscles that get really tired from my practice. And here, the edges of the block can massage those muscles there, and I can give it a little wiggle if I want to. And here I can even wave my nose a little from side to side if I'm feeling any tension in my neck. And it's lovely. But perhaps you want to do a little bit more, or you feel a bit closed here in the throat. So I find that after a while, I begin to feel that this space at the throat isn't open enough for me. So you can turn that block that's underneath your head onto its medium setting, and just see, maybe that just feels like the business. Maybe that feels too bendy in the back. You can bend the knees and place the feet on the floor. You can shift the tailbone around, whatever suits you. And if you find that that block underneath the head is still feeling quite high, or you'd like to explore a little lower, you can turn that block onto its lowest setting, and you get even more openness here in the front of the body. But we have to do the thing that suits us the most. So there's no point in straining or reaching or thinking that this is the goal, because it's not. The goal is for you to find the posture that suits you the best. So you can hold a supported fish like this, perhaps just for slightly less time than you would do a softer one, before rolling to one side and again removing the blocks, she says, not such a graceful dismount on this side, and then placing them to one side as you allow the spine to come back into that more neutral space, maybe even swaying the head a little from side to side. And if you've done a freestanding shoulder stand and you want to do this kind of fish pose, absolutely go for it, as long as you feel like it's had the ability of softening any effort or tension that you've got from your shoulder stand practice. No problem at all. And so that's the variation with the center block turned on its end, so along the length of the spine. You can also do this with the block turned sideways. And this is a variation I work with quite a lot, particularly if I'm concerned about that particular heart space across the front of the chest. And again, here you can grip the block between your elbows, she says, and then release over it. And that tends to get it in just the right place. And I didn't grip so well, so I can move the block a little bit. So you can find your way here. Of course, you can keep your knees bent and your feet on the floor, and adjusting your block, but making sure that the blocks feel really stable. So occasionally in class, when people are setting up, they set up that the blocks are slightly tipped. They haven't got the whole of their flat edge on the floor. And that will lead you to holding or resisting the release, the point of being in the posture. And so here, the block is really across that space, just at the bottom of the shoulder blades. Maybe I've got the bottom tip of my shoulder blades on the block, but you can have the block a little lower than that still, or across a more central space if you want to. And the back of the head supported, of course. And again, you can change the height of that block that's underneath your head to suit you, whichever place it would like to be. And to dismount, just gently rolling to one side, removing the blocks, placing them to one side, taking your opportunity to gently roll the head from one side to the other if you'd like to. Or bend the knees into the chest and hug them and make some rolling, massaging with the knees as well. And then when you're ready, just rolling to one side and coming up into sitting. So there are many, many more variations than the ones that we've done today, but these are accessible for most people, and shoulder stand variations and fish variations that are more complex than this are best learned with the guidance of a teacher in person. Remembering that your breath will always tell you if the posture you're doing is too fast too soon or too much too soon, because you'll be holding your breath or your breath won't be able to move. So pay attention to your breath, pay attention to how a posture feels in your body and your reaction to it in your emotions and in your mind as well. And you'll be guided into your own practice that way. If you have any questions or comments, please do let me know. I'm happy to give advice to any of the students that I see in person as well. Namaste, guys.